I grew up in a very small town in Vermont in the 1980s, so there wasn't a huge amount of possibilities in my immediate area back then. So my parents were always very supportive of the arts. I went to a liberal arts school for college. It didn't have a very good theater department, but I had an opportunity to go to London to study for my junior year, and had a movement teacher there who turned me on to mass theater, and at least planted like the seed in the back of my head that that's something that existed at all, and it kind of blew my mind. So it's been living with me ever since. Spent a lot of my 20s sort of wandering around. I lived in Seattle for a few years, doing a lot of sort of fringe theater, and I lived in Chicago doing the same thing, and then went to grad school at the University of California in Irvine to get an MFA in acting. I got my MFA, moved to New York City, and I've been there pretty much ever since. And I've done, voiceovers, a couple of TV shows, some national tours, some off-Broadway, regional theater. Became a teacher about 10 years ago, kind of by accident. And then have subsequently worked at NYU off and on for the last decade, teaching acting to dancers. But along the way, sort of maintaining this interest in mass theater. And I started a small theater company called Homunculus Mass Theater in New York about 10 years ago. And produced a few original devised pieces, and had the opportunity to come out here this year on this Grant Wood Fellowship to really focus on my mask making, my sculpting, my building, and then to devise a new piece of theater. In terms of workspace, I just turned the second bedroom in my house into a studio. And that may seem like not a great thing, but in New York, my apartment is tiny. It's really hard to do work there, and renting an art studio is also prohibitively expensive. So out here, I was able to take this rather large room and move all the furniture out and just make a real studio space in there. In terms of how we create the theater part, it's because I always consider what I do a two-part process. The masks are one thing, but it's really what happens when the masks get put into action and become kinesthetic and fluid, and they become theater. This year I really wanted to focus on what if we upped the movement element into almost a hybrid of a dance show and a masked theater show. And so a lot of the focus on the piece we just did was creating a dance vocabulary. I had actors come in the first day of rehearsal, and my actors had no idea what they were getting into because we didn't have a script. It's like, we're starting today, and in 6 weeks we're going to have something. The first thing I did was I had them all come in with 16 bars of music that they had choreographed themselves that they then had to teach to the group. So all the choreography in this show, and there was a lot of dancing, was not meant to look like trained dancers in a dance show. It was meant to look like it's a vocabulary that came out of the process itself. So all the movement has its own style for the show that we created. And the show was essentially a series of vignettes strung together by music with themes and stories that kind of interconnected. Being with three fellows, right, was really good. We're all doing different things. But just knowing that, we're here and there's three of us, it could be a little isolating otherwise. It feels really good to be a part of I guess a colony. I know it is the Grant Wood colony, but I feel that having that sort of camaraderie was really important. I didn't know much about Grant Wood before I got here, and now I know more. A lot of us out there only know American Gothic and a couple of other scenic pictures. And to realize the breadth of this man's work, not only was he a painter, but he was a carpenter, and he was a builder, and he was a man of ideas. And I think that's important. And again, talking about like the house across the street, it's just phenomenal. I know it's been restored, but what an amazing piece of architecture that is. I guess the way that we cement Grant Wood's legacy is by participating in what's happened after him. It's like being a great grandkid of the man himself, right? Or maybe it's we pass it down. And even though the work I'm doing is not Grant Wood-esque, it's still made possible because of what he did, and also the people who are committed to keeping his legacy alive.